Okay, and we are live. Wonderful. Becky, would you like to kick things off?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's great to, well, not see you, but to be talking to you. I'm Rebecca Beasley, and I'm the Director of Teaching in the English faculty at Oxford. And I'm also a tutor in English at Queen's. And I'm really happy to be talking to you today about the English course at Oxford. I'm really sorry it's not in person. Normally we'd be all grouped together in a really big lecture hall in our English faculty building. I'd be able to see your faces, which would be lovely. I wish we were meeting in that form. But nevertheless, I really hope that this morning I can give you a bit of an idea of what it's like to be studying at Oxford. I wanted to just start by saying a tiny bit about what a weird year it's been. It hasn't been a very representative year of studying at Oxford, and I'm going to, most of what I say is going to be about normal years at Oxford, which we hope we'll be moving into from the autumn. But I did just want to mention that even though this year has been very unusual, we've been quite lucky at Oxford that quite a lot of what we've been able to do, we've been able to do in person. So we were able to teach all of our faculty classes in person. Lectures were online, and different colleges chose how they would organise their tutorial teaching. I'll say more about what that is in a minute, in different ways. But at Queen's, and my college, for example, we did teach all of our Queen's English tutorials in person. So we were very lucky to be able to do something a bit more normal, I think, than some universities were able to do, partly because we're very large and we had the space to do it, and we teach in small groups that was possible to social distance. Okay, that said, I'm now going to introduce the other people that you can see on your screen. In fact, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So can I ask Macy and Hetta, first of all, to say who you are?
Hi. Oh. Do you want to go? You go, Hetta.
Okay. Hello, I'm Hetta. I'm a first year English student at Worcester College.
Hiya, I'm Macy, and I am also a first year English student, but I'm at Brasenose College.
And then I would say our host today is Alfie. Alfie, do you want to say who you are?
Hi, yeah, that leaves me. I'm Alfie. I'm the Outreach and Admissions Officer at the English faculty. So I'm the one who's answering all your questions on Slido, and I'll be hosting all the sessions today. So if you do have anything you want to ask us, let us know either on Slido, in the YouTube comments, or you can email me at undergraduate.admissions@ell.ox.ac.uk. Right, Becky, if you'd like to hand it out, I'll hand it back to you. Take it away.
So I'm going to share my screen now.
Wonderful.
And PowerPoint for you. So, is that working okay? Are you nodding? Yes. Okay, great. So this slide has some of the writers that you might encounter, you might study while you're here at Oxford. And some of these were, in fact, even Oxford students. So looking along the top row, you might recognise some of these people. Perhaps the most recognisable is Oscar Wilde at the top left there. And then Patience Agbabi, Monica Ali, Seamus Heaney, and Jeanette Winston, who might be hidden by my head, I'm afraid. Depending where you can move me out of the way so you can see Jeanette, which is a much better person to be looking at. They all studied English at Oxford. But in the English faculty, you can study literature written in English from anywhere in the world at any time in any form. So you're also likely to encounter, for example, going from the left, Virginia Woolf, Geoffrey Chaucer, William Shakespeare, Emily Dickinson, Chinua Achebe, and Vladimir Nabokov. They weren't at Oxford, and you'll encounter many other fantastic writers besides. Okay. So what do people say about the English faculty at Oxford? Well, We're lucky enough, well, I guess it's not luck, but we are ranked #1 as the best English faculty in the world in the QS World University Rankings League Table. And in fact, we've held that top position for the last 6 years. Why is that? Well, our department is the largest, has the largest number of staff in the UK. We've got great students, 2 of whom you can see on your screen. And we teach much of our course through the tutorial system, which I'll talk in a bit more detail about later on. But it basically means that a lot of your tuition takes place in very small groups, either with one other student or one-to-one with your tutor. So you get a lot of close attention. Here's a comment from one of our students talking about what she has enjoyed on the Oxford course. She says, the best part about the Oxford English course, or the English course at Oxford, is the amazing teaching. From one-to-one tutorials with experts to weekly seminars with other enthusiastic students and the dozens of optional lectures every week. The course really allows you to engage with literature in different ways. You feel like your work is cared about and you're given the support you need to reach your full potential. And I think that last statement is the thing that I would really emphasize as being what we care about above all in teaching through the tutorial system, the special way that we teach at Oxford. So what's it like? What are the key features of the course? We've got a very wide-ranging course on literature in English from its beginnings to the present day. And it consists of a series of core papers, and then you get to choose specialisms in your final year. Its distinctive characteristic is its use of the tutorial system. And we've got some fantastic teachers, and you're meeting some of those today. Every one of the people who's talking to you today, every one of the tutors who's talking to you today is an English tutor in a college who teaches undergraduates. So these are the people that you could work with. You'll find that you're attending classes and lectures with the academics who've written the books, which are the main books in the field that you're studying. We have great library resources, including access to rare books and manuscripts, as well as really good online facilities, which of course was vital this year. So our amazing kind of library system, it's kind of multiple libraries under the heading of the Bodleian, is actually a copyright library, which means it receives every book that is published in Britain. Of course, it buys things which are published elsewhere as well, but it means that you can rely on getting any book that's published in Britain, over the last 100 years, probably, maybe a little bit, yeah, around that, I would say. Also, manuscript material of many famous writers that you can work with yourself. Shelley and Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein, of course, the pre-Raphaelite poets, T.S. Eliot, Iris Murdoch, their personal papers, their letters, their manuscripts are in our library. And you could use them for any of your essays or work on them in your dissertation if you wanted to. We also have really good extracurricular opportunities, including opportunities in creative writing and in drama. And those are available at all kinds of levels. You can take first steps in your future career as an actor or as an author, or you can just try things out and see whether you're interested and where your talents lie. So you're taught both in the English faculty and in your home college. So you'll choose a college when you apply. So Macy, for example, is taught both in the faculty and in Brasenose College, where one of her tutors is Sos Eltis, who you'll be meeting later if you come to her talk. And Heta, similarly, is taught both in the faculty and in Worcester College. You're taught in the faculty mainly in larger groups, so in lectures and in classes. You'll have a palette of lectures to choose from relating to the courses that you're studying that term, and your college tutor would advise you on the lectures that are most appropriate for you to go to. Unusually at university, our lectures are mainly optional. Lecturers are tutors from the different colleges. You get to encounter a really wide range of different approaches. And in lectures, students from different colleges are all coming together in groups of anything from 10 to 250 in our one compulsory lecture. And they're brought together by their interest in the particular authors and topics that are being discussed. So in your college, you'll have classes and tutorials, and much of your teaching will be in your college with the other students who are studying English there. Classes tend to be on broader topics to build up historical and intellectual context of a topic. Based around set reading, you might be asked to do a presentation or a group presentation, or to do some kind of group work, and they tend to be focused around discussion. Tutorials, tutorials are based around essays. So the standard tutorial will have one tutor and two students, and you'd be given, say, a week to read about a topic or an author and write a short essay about what you've been reading, and you hand in your essay the night before or a bit before, and then in the tutorial, the tutor will discuss your essay with you, developing your ideas. It's really a great way of developing your oral and written skills. At Oxford, you write very frequently, and the discussion is really exploratory and stretching. I assure you that it's not, I think, a combative way of being taught. I'm going to come back to Heta and Macy in just a moment and ask them about how whether there are things that they've enjoyed about this kind of teaching, but I'll just run through the different ways of being taught before I do that. I'm just giving you a heads up, Macy and Heta. Okay, so you'll also be doing independent research with access to these great library resources that I was mentioning. So increasingly through your degree, as your skills develop, you'll be doing that. There's lots of flexibility to choose topics, the topics that you're writing about for your weekly essays as you move through the degree. And in your final year, you'll develop your dissertation topic, and it will be your very own dissertation topic. And you'll be studying under the supervision of an expert in the field. So you'll be guided through your dissertation work, but it will be very much the thing that you want to work on. And the final thing that I want to say on this slide is just that we've got very good contact hours in terms of the amount of time that you get to spend with tutors, in lectures, in classes. I think that maybe a normal week, and Heta and Macy may want to correct me if their experience has been different, as it might have been in this unusual year, I hasten to say, but I would think a normal week might be 2 or 3 kind of compulsory classes in a week, which would probably in your first year be happening in the college, 1 or 2 tutorials, and then you can go to as many lectures as you want to. They run in normal times from 9 till 1 every day. So perhaps you'd have 6 to 8 hours of teaching in the college and attend maybe 8 lectures a week. Okay, I'm going to pause there and turn first to Heta, if that's okay, Heta, and say, is there anything that you would want to pick out that you've enjoyed about the way that you've been taught this year, or anything you want to say about you know, the kind of hours and things that belong to this slide?
Yeah, I'd say that my experience with like a typical week at Oxford is, as you said, there'll be for me about 1 tutorial a week, roughly 3 classes, and then you know, you can pick which lectures you find most beneficial to the week or the week ahead for you to attend and make notes on. I think for me, one of the main things is the tutorials that really stand out as something that I found really valuable whilst doing my first year here, because it can be sort of intimidating initially if you think, oh, okay, I'm going almost head to head with a tutor with my essay, but it's sort of very, as you say, exploratory, and it's not a case of I'm being marked on this work. It's a case of sometimes you can exchange essays with your tutorial partner, which then lends itself to being able to gauge a different aspect of the topic you're writing about. And then once you're sort of engaging with your tutor about the essay and the week's topic, you sort of get a greater sense of, you know, things you can include later, things you might want to go back and write about in another essay. So they're really valuable when it comes to sort of expanding your knowledge from the classes and the tutorials that you have in that week as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Macy, is there anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, just about, again, the nourishment that comes from a tutorial system. Even when I've been like, my tutor's not terrified. Sos is the least terrifying woman, but even if I'd thought that I'd performed poorly, or perhaps my essay might not have been as proud of my work, I still would get like so much out of a tutorial from slipping up a little bit, or maybe, you know, my tutor would kind of really pick apart in some really great detail, like my wording and the way that I thought about what I produced, and she'd get more out of me than I ever thought I'd written or ever thought I'd really thought. So sitting down with my tutor and her kind of going, what about this wording, or what do you quite mean by this, like, and getting me to speak that aloud. And then my constant advice always being, why don't you just write what you speak? Why don't you just write what you think? So you can always get something from it. It can be a little bit daunting because it's almost, well, you know, you're sitting with a tutor and it's can be a little bit intimidating, but you always get something out of it. I've never come out of a tutorial and not felt like my knowledge had just gone afterwards. Like, I always learn something. It's been brilliant.
Thank you both so much. There's a great testimony to how good your tutors are, and knowing your tutors, I know that that's all true. Okay, let's go on and talk a little bit about the first year course structure. So this is actually the course that Hetta and Macy have been following over the past year. So when we've talked through this slide, I'll just come back to them and ask them what their favourite bit of it was. So you do 4 what we call papers in the first year. The first paper, Introduction to English Language and Literature, kind of falls into 2 halves. The first part focuses on language, the different ways that the English language works, from thinking about use of metaphor to thinking about social class, gender, ethnicity, you know, how those things shape the way that we use language. And then the other half is about literary theory, encouraging us to think about the big questions that are implicit in our study of literature. So, for example, how do we decide what is literature and what isn't? Who gets to decide what is literature and what isn't? What determines how we read, and how do we judge the value of a text? Those kinds of big questions you're taking through. It's kind of a slightly more philosophical approach to thinking about literature. And then there are 3 papers that we could refer to as period papers. You can see why we would do that. Paper 2 is the early medieval literature paper. So that's new to pretty much everyone, and you're taught Old English from scratch to work on that paper. And I think that's a paper often that people come to with some fear and trembling, but many absolutely love it and are absolutely converted to the study of the early periods. Papers 3 and 4 are perhaps a bit more familiar, so they're kind of other end of literary history. There are no set texts in these papers, so your tutor will introduce you to particular texts. They'll have an idea of what they would encourage you to study, but you can also bring in what's interesting to you as well. The language and literary theory paper is assessed by a portfolio of 2 short essays, and you have a week and a half to complete it. You do that in the last term of the first year. And then you have 3 exams that you sit at the end of the year. So those 3 period papers are assessed by exam. And the first year, important thing to say, doesn't contribute to your final degree classification. So you do get a classification, but it isn't part of what you end up graduating with. It's a separate section of the degree. So back to you, Heta and Macy. Maybe Macy, I should come to you first this time. Can you tell us which bit of the first year course you enjoyed most? So that might be an essay you enjoyed writing, or which paper you liked working
on. So I personally, I'm a Victorian girl. So I love paper 3, and I was coming to the course excited to do paper 3. So that's the one that we do first in Michaelmas, the first term of the year, and I just loved that. And my tutor, her specialities are in like Victorian drama and things, so had a lot of nourishing work and really enjoyed coming to that part of the course. But in terms of kind of learning a new skill set, paper 1 I thoroughly enjoyed, because it's kind of a different approach to literature, and I've become increasingly interested in linguistics and how language is used, and I was finding myself applying that to areas like other thematic areas of my course. So I'm very interested in social class and politics, and learning about how language contributes to that, and how I can then see that in fiction rather than non-fiction work, was something new and quite exciting that I really got my teeth into. So I enjoyed applying paper 1 to the rest of the papers.
Thank you so much. That sounds great. Heta.
I'd say, like Macy, I was very much looking forward to the Victorian paper and the modern literature coming into the course. And as you say, there can be a bit of sort of, I guess, hesitation around the early medieval literature paper, but I actually really enjoyed that paper. I loved getting into the Old English text, which I never would have expected from me. And I think that's one of the great things about the course, is that it's such a wide range of text that there's something to love in every paper you do. Like Macy said, with paper 1, I really enjoyed being able to apply my own interests to my analysis. So I would look at, for example, Jamaican dialects, and I knew one of my friends who's from Nottingham did Nottingham dialects. Like, you can bring in so much of your own personal sort of interests and apply them to what you learn, which is great. But I'd say there is something to love in sort of every single paper. Like, as much as I love The Wanderer, I could still talk about Giovanni's Room for forever and a day. So it's very wide ranging.
Brilliant. Yes, those are really helpful points, I think, to make at this juncture, that the openness of the Oxford course really does enable you to kind of make it your own. And I think the fact that you've already been able to do that in your first year is really interesting, and that ability to make it your own only increases over the course of the degree. As you learn more, you're able to be more kind of confident and authoritative in your choices, and indeed in your final year you get to specialise. Let's look at what happens after the first year. So after the first year, you go into your next 2 years, or your final 2 years of the course, which we call the final honours school. So this is what Macy and Heta are going to be doing next year and the year after. So as you see here, we've got a kind of filling in of the period paper sandwich. So a series of papers which kind of fill in the literary periods that you haven't studied in your first year. By the end of your second year, you've studied all the literary periods, and you can judge what you want to specialise in. You also take a paper on Shakespeare, which does involve close study of his text, but also it's quite an unorthodox Shakespeare paper, in that it allows you to study really anything about Shakespeare studies. So that might be you studying Shakespeare in 21st century film, or recent authors' adaptations of Shakespeare, or you might want to study a particular production that you've seen, and kind of close analysis of that. So it's a very creative paper. And then in your final year, you do these 2 papers which are very much focused on what you most want to work on. So paper 6, there are a series of options which I'm going to show you in just a minute. You choose from about 25 what you would like to study, and they're taught in faculty classes. So you're taught with students from other colleges in a group of between about 8 and 15. And then there's your dissertation, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. So the assessment takes place over the course of your final year. You don't have exams in your second year, but in your final year you'll have exams, a mixture of exams and coursework. So I mentioned this paper 6 special option paper. So here are some examples of things that you might want to study. This is some of the options that we've got offered to this year's third years, or the people who are going into the third year. So I'll let you have a little kind of read through here to see what kinds of things here. But as I say, we normally have about 25 of these, so this is just some of them. So as you can see, they typically cover lots of different kinds of periods, different kinds of genres. So some would be on drama, some on fiction, some on poetry, some mixing them. And they don't necessarily fit into a particular period. One of the things that we particularly try to do in paper 6 is do things which cross the periods, so that you can start making those connections between the papers that you've studied so far. Now, what might you do for your dissertation? Basically, you can do anything that we're able to supervise. And luckily, since we're such a big department, we can usually find somebody who has some expertise in pretty much anything. It's very rare that we turn down a topic. So here are some recent dissertation topics. And again, I'll let you just have a read through. So I think what you can see here is that there are various different approaches. These are going to be quite different kinds of dissertations, and that's absolutely fine. We really welcome that. Some of the approaches here might look quite familiar to you. They might look quite standardly literary, but you can see that you can also do some really specific historically based research, like poetry in Lancashire, cotton famine, or you can study texts which you might not normally think of as necessarily literary. So, for example, the Renaissance recipe books, but it's all text, it's all language, and therefore it's all up for analysis in our book. So I think that most people really enjoy working on their dissertation because it is their time to choose the thing that they have been kind of mulling over perhaps for a while, and which brings to fruition all of their different interests from their first year onwards. Okay. What else does our department do? So a few other things that I'll just mention a little bit more briefly. We have, what I've been describing is known in the faculty as Course 1, but we also have the inventively named Course 2. So after you've finished your first year, you can choose to specialise in older literature, in manuscript study and in language work. We have special options in other languages, as it says here, so like Old French, Old German, and so on. So if you are a linguist and you're interested in doing a language which would be quite difficult for you to do elsewhere or on your own, in your final year, you have the opportunity to do that. And I should also mention that you can write on literature and translation in any of our papers. And there are slightly different rules for different papers, but the general rule is up to 1/3 of any paper can be on literature and translation. We also offer joint degrees with classics and modern languages and history. They're all organised slightly differently, but basically you do roughly half of the English course and half of the other course if you do one of these, with various opportunities for connecting things up across the degrees. Okay, programme outcomes. So what are you going to have achieved? What skills are you going to have gained by the time that you've completed the degree? So I think that you will have an extensive knowledge of literature in English and different ways of engaging with it. You'll have developed your skills of critical judgment and of reasoning. You will have advanced analytical skills. And you'll have sophisticated communication skills. In fact, I think you could already hear that, well, maybe Hetta and Macy already had sophisticated communication skills, but you've certainly got sophisticated communication skills today. People go into a very wide range of careers. You don't necessarily have to go into a career which is closely related to English. So our students go into careers such as law, journalism, they go into charity work, they go into the civil service, into media, advertising, teaching, finance, creative writing, publishing. The skills that we teach in an English literature degree open up many doors because so many fields require high levels of communication and analysis. We have a great careers service. It's totally free service, and the amazing thing about it is you can access it for the rest of your life once you've studied here. And I'll just show you some of the organisations that students on our internship programmes have worked with. We've got a great internship programme which the Careers Service organises. I'll just leave that for a moment. And now I'm going to come back just to my final slide and see if you've got any questions. And please feel free to ask me questions, but also please feel free to ask Hetta and Macy questions too. Alfie, are you going to mastermind this section?
Hi, yes, I will. So if people would like to leave any questions in the YouTube comments or send them in on Slido, I'm speedily looking at them on my other screen currently. So when I spot things that are being asked, I will relay them here.
Okay. Well, so while we're waiting, can I maybe return to Hetta and Macy and
of course.
And again, I feel bad for putting you on the spot. Is there anything that while I was talking that you thought it would be good to mention that I didn't cover? Feel free to say no, since I have put you on the spot here, but were there things that popped into your head as we were going through?
I just want to say about when you mentioned that you can do any topic for your dissertation as long as there's somebody to supervise. Something that I've loved finding out is just that not that there's nothing that your tutor doesn't know, but that your tutor is largely, I would say, has fingers in a lot of knowledge pies. So anything that you want to investigate, or anything that you want to learn or further reading, all three of the tutors that I've had this year have been able to point me in directions that are completely random, like that aren't associated with their expertise, but that they might still be accustomed to, or something that maybe I've done that my tutors picked up on and thought, oh, that's interesting, I know a little bit about that, I can try and find out some more for you. Or so it's really expansive. The kind of resources that have been available to me and made available to me by my tutors have just been limitless, really. Not just condensed to Old English or theatre or anything like that. It's never condensed.
Thank you, that's great. I'm really glad to hear it.
We've got a couple of questions trickling in, so I'll put them through to you now. Hetta, what did you read over the summer before coming to applying? And the same for Macy then.
So my sort of Oxford journey, my journey to Oxford was a little bit different in that I took a gap year. So by the time the reading list came through, I knew that I was in and that I could start my reading sort of as soon as I got the list. As Macy said, Michaelmas is mainly Victorian literature and that era. And you will read a lot, but anything from Middlemarch to The Woman in White. One of the sort of texts that I really enjoyed was the slave narratives, so Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl and My Bondage and My Freedom. But you can also compare that to Uncle Tom's Cabin. And as Macy said, there is just such a wide range of topics within the eras as well. So every week looks different, although it's all sort of from the same time period. The topics and the subjects that you get taught and you talk about per book vary so widely from week to week that even within one paper you're still learning a lot of expansive like knowledge of the primary text and secondary reading as well, because the topics just range so much depending on the books you're studying and what you're comparing them to.
Great. And Macy, what did you read the summer before applying or before coming to Oxford?
So we got given a pretty hefty reading list, but it wasn't prescriptive. It was kind of recommended. So I would say something that I did enjoy, like in my reading journey, is that about half of the reading list was like classical, like revered canonical Victorian literature, you know, George Eliot and the Brontes and Thackeray and Dickens and things. But then half was kind of stuff I'd never even heard of. So we were really kind of encouraged to read a little bit outside the box, or think about, like Hetta said, like we were reading like Hannah Crafts and things, and personal narratives and diary entries and kind of things and literature made from marginalized perspectives that didn't become canonized or, you know, kind of revered as popular or classical literature. And personally, I came from a place of, I mean, when I came to my interviews, I read very, very minimal. I was very insecure about the amount of classical literature I'd read, and that was never a problem. So I did do a bit of catching up on the kind of classics and some Eliot and some bigger reads and some Dickens. Getting through Our Mutual Friend did help me out, and Middlemarch, they're pretty hefty. But also being able to do some things that I ended up enjoying that I'd never actually heard of. So a nice mix I got introduced to.
Wonderful, great.
Can
I think, sorry, of course.
Just a bit about the kind of reading at the point of application, which of course the people listening to this will be especially thinking about. It's just really helpful to bounce off what Hetta and Macy have just said. I mean, I think from an admissions tutor's point of view, so, you know, I'm one of the people, and Soz and Emma, who you're going to see later on, they also are people who would be interviewing you. What we care about is seeing your enthusiasm for reading and that you're interested in stretching yourself. So what I would suggest, if you're thinking about reading in preparation for applying to Oxford, is to think, where are your gaps at the moment? What might stretch you? So if Macy thought, oh my God, I've never read a great big Victorian novel, I'm going to read Our Mutual Friend, I would have found that very impressive in an interview, that somebody had thought, this isn't my comfort zone, and I'm going to fill this in. Having the courage to build up a kind of breadth, I think, is good. People have all kinds of different schooling and knowledge when they come to interview, so don't worry too much about that. As long as you are doing your best to develop your interests, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you all. I think that also connects to a few of the other comments I'm seeing about personal statement application tips. And I think, to kind of summarize what you've just said, it's really good to find gaps in your knowledge, to cover some bases, but also to really just dive in on the things you love reading and love studying, and really show us your passion for that in your personal statement. And if you can, you know, pull links and tease apart something you love with something that might be brand new to you, you can just come across, and that's wonderful. Okay, so another question we're getting is, you know, how much is the English degree grounded in historical context? Maybe that's one for all of you to whiz through quickly. I'm aware we don't have much longer left on the stream.
Okay. Shall I just quickly start? I mean, it is structured as in quite a historical way, as you saw, that we have these historical period papers. And I think you do emerge with a sense of the historical context of the literature that you're working within. That's true. But alongside that, there is so much flexibility about what you actually study and the way that you study it. So you could end up being kind of wanting to study things from a kind of linguistic or more theoretical perspective, and that is absolutely fine. These kind of capacious papers will hold anything, but it's true that the course is structured in a historical way. I don't know whether Heta and Macy want to add anything to
that. Something that I found different to A level, which might be directly like useful in this context, is that when I did my literature A level, context would be supplementary. So you kind of add it on. And so, oh, and by the way, Shakespeare was writing at a time where women were oppressed or something like that. Whereas we have an awareness of context, and we're encouraged to use it in a kind of helpful accessory. So it's not something that I've been taught. It's kind of just having an awareness and how that nourishes the way that you write and think about the literature, rather than being scared about knowing a certain amount of context.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that it's it's not like overt. And just because, for example, in a Victorian paper, for example, if I'm writing about Jane Eyre, I don't feel like I can't, for example, include something like Why the Sargasso Sea, which was written decades later, and put that in the same essay. So you can sort of shift and use bits from other papers in one essay from another paper.
Lovely. Yeah. I think we'll just try and squeeze in a couple more. So I've got an interesting one here about the written work that you submit as part of your application. Becky, if you could just answer roughly what you're looking for as a tutor in that written work, and then Macy and Heta, if you could say what you actually submitted.
Well, I think the first thing to say is do look at our website if you're planning to apply, because we put there the criteria that we're looking for in interviews and in written work, and we really do look for those things. So in written work, we're looking for analytical ability, for example, that you're able to look at a text and think closely about how it works, how it fits together. We're looking for, again, enthusiasm, that you're interested in thinking about the way that language works. I think that's probably a good thing to highlight as well. How is something expressed, not just what is being expressed. I think maybe those are the two things that I would pick out, but do look at our website, which gives the full list there.
Macy, what did you write about for your written work?
So I think when I applied anyway, sorry, I can't think of the word. The criteria, sorry, for written work was something that had already been written and marked. So it wasn't something I had to write on the spot. It was something that I'd done at school, had to kind of be a little bit au naturel. So I remember being a little bit hesitant to kind of, it wasn't my best work, but we studied dystopian literature. So I think it was 1984, The Handmaid's Tale, and an analysis of propaganda and language. So that kind of ties into exactly what Rebecca was saying about language use. Kind of subconsciously, I probably didn't think about the fact that that's what I was talking about. So that's what I did. It was just like an A level, like an X exam paper or practice exam paper or something like that had been marked by my teachers at school.
Great, thank you. And Heta?
So for me, I used an excerpt of my A-level English coursework. So I did Anna Karenina and the picture of Dorian Gray. And I was talking about beauty and tragedy. So not overtly tied to language, but within that, you're sort of analysing the language just as a byproduct of what you're writing. So again, it's sort of nothing to worry about. It's something you've already written, and you can pick something you have confidence in because it's something that's also already been marked. And even if you may think, oh, overtly, this might not tie into what I need to do, if you look at it, you'll realize that you do already have the skill set you need to produce work that is ready for that sort of application process.
Fab, thanks. So we're drawing to the end of our stream now, but I think just this one last line. If you could give your past self any piece of advice before application, Heta and Macy, what would it be? Just quickly, and then we'll have to leave.
I would say when you're tackling those hefty reading lists, just make sure you're making notes as you go, because notes will end up being your lifesaver. Write down page numbers. And also a tip that I sort of found really helpful is don't be daunted by the reading list. Yes, it can look very intimidating, but actually reading along to audiobooks can be really helpful, getting through like the bigger books as well.
Yeah.
Mine would just be to try your best to be really excited, because it is I'm a proper like geek, so I was excited, but when you come here and you get to talk for the first time really about a book, and it's not a kind of reproduced idea that your teacher has given you, or that a critic, it must be true because a critic, Harold Bloom, says this. So it's not like that. It's that you get to kind of speak your mind and your opinion about a book. So when you're reading it, try and think about that. Like, if you don't enjoy it, think why. Make some notes, like Heta said, why you don't like Heart of Darkness or something. Like, make and format opinions, and be ready to own those opinions and enjoy making an opinion, I think.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Becky. Thank you for a wonderful talk. That's the end of our stream, and we'll see you all in the next ones. Great. Thank you.